Hello, this is David Books and Comics, and today we're going to look at the Bell novels that were published by Bell Features in 1945 and 46. Now, Bell Features, they'd been around since 1941 under the name Commercial Signs of Canada, so you have to ask yourself, why would a company wait 4 years to start publishing books? Why didn't they just publish them right away along with their comic books? Well, the answer goes back to 1940 with the creation of uh, an act of parliament that was passed in December. And basically, what it said was that certain goods that were deemed to be non essential were not allowed into Canada. This was to protect the Canadian economy during the war years. One of the things that were restricted were the importation of magazines, but not all magazines. Like magazines like the Slicks, like New Yorker, Saturday Evening Post, they were allowed into Canada. But things like pulp magazines, true crime magazines, romance magazines, confession magazines, and comic magazines were not allowed into Canada. They were deemed lowbrow junk literature. So all of a sudden you have this vacuum, and there's no publications coming into the US, in from the US. So a lot of publishers decided to get into the publishing business, and other companies got into it, and they weren't even publishers. And one of those was Commercial Signs of Canada, which is a sign printing and painting company based out of Toronto and headed by two brothers, Cy Bell and Eugene Bell. And they started publishing their comic books. But what happened was, as the war progressed, it started winding down. The Canadian government started easing the restrictions on importation of goods. So these companies, not just Bell Features, but some of the other companies, they saw the writing on the wall. So they started switching to color comics, whereas before they had been black and white. Initially it was color, but then black and white. And they saw the competition was going to come soon and that the restrictions were going to be dropped eventually after the war was finished. So one of the things they did was they started diversifying. They added color to their comics. Bell Features did coloring books. They did anthologies of previously published material like Nelvana, Speed Savage. And another thing they did was they introduced the Bell novels. And that's what we're going to show today. There are 17 altogether, as far as I know. Some of them are first book publication, some of them are paperback originals, and some of them are reprints of previously published books. Now, I have to differentiate what the difference is between a previously published book, like a first book publication, and a paperback original. They're actually not the same thing. A first book publication is a book that has previously been published in a different format, like in magazine format, whereas a paperback original is a book that has never appeared anywhere else under any format. Okay, so the first books they did 3 books in 1945, and they were these aren't numbered in any none of them have numbers. They're all digest size. They all have line drawn covers. None of them are painted covers, and they're all saddle stitched. They're all basically the same format. Okay, there are no order. There's no numbers at all. Okay, so first up I'm going to show is the Dress Circle Murders. Now this is a reprint of an American Digest, and even though the artwork is signed right here, Dingle, who was Adrian Dingle, who was the art director for Bell Features. He unabashedly signed it, even though it's a direct swipe. The cover is a direct swipe of the American Digest. But they also did books that were first book publication, and the first one they did was The Blonde and the Outlaw by Murray Leinster, who was better known as a science fiction writer, but he wrote quite a few westerns as well. His real name is Will F. Jenkins. Now, this cover is also Adrian Dingle. Another one they did in 1945, they only did 3. That was Curtain Call for Murder by Peter Yates. Once again, the cover is a direct swipe, and once again, it's Adrian Dingle doing the artwork. Now, the back covers of these, they're usually a little illustration. They have a little blurb on the back, a little synopsis. And they're pretty much uniform, a little illustration, usually by the artist who did the cover art. Okay. In fact, this one here is even the back cover is an exact swipe of the American Digest, which is kind of interesting. Okay, so I'm going to show you first all the reprint ones they did. Okay, and the ones that they did reprints, most of them were reprints of digests, previously published American Digests. Terra Mocking Valley, I don't think the cover is signed here. This is a direct swipe as well, only the cover is a mirror image of the original. Then we have another one is Homicide Johnny by Stephen Gould. Gould, of course, was a pseudonym of Steve Fisher, a really well-regarded crime writer, hard-boiled crime writer. Then we have Love Throws a Loop by Herbert Shapiro. The interesting thing about this book, it's a Dingle cover, by the way. The interesting thing about this book, when you look inside, the byline is Murray Leinster, but this is actually Herbert Shapiro, Herbert Arthur Shapiro. He later changed his name to Bert Arthur. Okay, but the actual author is Shapiro, and the original title was The Texan. Another reprint book, this is a reprint of a hardcover book, is Renegade Westerner by Leslie Ernenwine. This is Adrian Dingle cover. Another reprint, this time of a digest, is Haunted Harbor by Dale Douglas. The artwork's not signed. Once again, the cover is a direct swipe of the American Digest and a mirror image. Then we have Dennis and Clift's The Spy in the Room. Once again, a reprint of an American Digest, and once again, the cover is a direct swipe. Okay, so let's move these aside. And now we have, this is a first book publication. It's Cowgirl Fury by Murray Leinster. Cover is not signed, but this is definitely the artwork of Adrian Dingle. Under the Sign of the Six Shooter by R.W. Porter. That's American writer Raymond W. Porter. Once again, the artwork is by Dingle. And I believe this is a first book publication, but I'm not positive. Cowgirl Fury is. It's a first book publication, previously published in magazine format, though. Then we have Living by the Trigger by, once again, Raymond W. Porter. Now, the artwork down here is signed Rene. Rene was, of course, Rene Coolback. Coolback was one of the more popular artists with Bell Features. He was particularly good at drawing horses. Whenever there was a story, either a comic story or one of the books that had horses in it, sure enough, Rene Coolback was the artist. Okay, so these are first book publications. So let's set these aside. Now the rest of them are paperback originals. The Kunwak Treasure by Keith Edgar, Canadian pulp writer. He was a former newspaperman, cameraman, turned writer. He wrote quite a few, actually, books. An interesting thing about some of the Bell novels is there are variants. So I have here another copy of the Kunwak Treasure. And you will notice that the book is actually different on the back cover. It's actually got a Polish flag. A Polish flag on the cover. Like why that is, I'm not really sure. I've never read this, so I couldn't tell you. Okay, so that's Kunwak Treasure. Then we have another Keith Edgar book, and that is Canyon of Death. And of course, you see a horse there, so of course that's Rene Coolback, and you can see his signature in the corner here. Cowboy Kid from Bear Paw by Cliff Earle. Once again, this is an Adrian Dingle cover, but this cover is a swipe from an American pulp magazine. I think it's New Western, but the cover is a mirror image. Then we have Layla, Queen of the Range by Buck Armstrong, another paperback original. This is definitely Adrian Dingle. It's not signed, but just looking at the picture, the illustration, it looks like Nelvana of the Northern Lights, which is Dingle's famous creation. It looks like Nelvana out on the range. So, and the final one I want to show is Heart in Chains by Dorothy Edgar. Now, Dorothy Edgar is almost certainly Keith Edgar, because this is a romance. It looks like a crime novel, but it's actually a romance. The cover art probably Adrian Dingle. Now, of course, all of these have the illustrations on the back cover. Some of them are a little more elaborate than others. Some of them are fairly simple with a simple blurb. Uh, they're all pretty nice. Okay, the design is pretty much the same. Once again, back covers. Okay, some of the back covers, like they're a little bit more elaborate than others. Some of them are fairly simple, like the one I showed earlier just shows a skull. Now you will notice also on some of these, you'll notice up in here, it's kind of hard to see, but there's the 1 shilling price. Now these were published by Bell, but they were not distributed by Bell. They were actually distributed by a British company called Pemberton's of Manchester. And what happened was, in the UK after the war, they had import restrictions on books coming in from the US. But since Canada was part of the British Commonwealth, uh, their books were allowed into the UK. So a lot of Canadian publishers started producing books exclusively for sale in the UK. They saw a chance to, make a quick buck in the UK, sort of the reverse of what happened in Canada. And one of the publishers was Bell Features, of course. And these were all distributed by Pemberton's, a company from Manchester, England. And so you will see the price over there, but you will notice on some of them, you will see the 10-cent price over here. Okay, and there's another one here, Haunted Harbor. You see the 10-cent price. And on some of them, you even see a 25-cent sticker. So these did have limited distribution in Canada. And as far as I know, no distribution in the US. So these are pretty scarce. For the most part, they're scarce. There's a few that are a little easier to find than others. I think of the reprint editions, probably the hardest one to find is Haunted Harbor. And of the paperback originals, probably the Kunwak Treasure. So there you go. A pretty scarce series of books. Uh, Pretty hard to find, like as a set. You can find the odd one every now and then, but getting a set together is pretty difficult. Anyways, if you're somebody who's interested in Canadian comic books, this is definitely something for you, because these are all the artists who worked for Bell Features worked on these. They're pretty cool. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you next time.